And through the 12th century, residents moved away to the periphery of the San Juan Basin. There's some indications that there was conflict between the successor communities of Mesa Verde and Aztec to the north. Nevertheless, by the 1190s, rains had started falling again, and you might expect that might mean a revival of Chaco culture. But as Alexis de Tocqueville reminds us, it's often not when things are going bad that societies revolt, but after a period of bad governance, when things begin to turn better, is when trouble erupts. Last year at this conference, Jeff Pettis reminded us of the importance of visibility in Breaking Bad. Who can see whom often determines who controls whom. Pettis cited Michel Foucault's Discipline and Punish, which focused on the architectural construct of the panopticon. A panopticon is a cylindrical building, generally with a central observation tower surrounded by light-filled cells. A single observer can observe everyone, but no one can observe the central observer, and no one can observe each other. For example, District 13 in Mockingjay in the Hunger Games series is a very good example of a panopticon. And the reason surveillance is so important is people behave differently if they feel that they're being observed than if they aren't being observed. It's often considered to be an attribute of modern society, this role of surveillance, but Pueblo Bonito functions almost as a natural panopticon because the low cliffs on both sides of Chaco Canyon allow great visibility. The desert air is very clear. The whole purpose of Chaco Canyon seems to have been to explicate astronomical patterns, particularly equinox, solstice, and lunar standstill patterns. And it could be that pre-modern societies, pre-modern desert societies that are engaged in mammoth undertakings, where they have to control large labor forces. At Pueblo Bonito, it would have been a large seasonal labor force, are under an even greater imperative to use surveillance than even modern societies are. And here's a picture of Chaco Canyon illustrating how the low cliffs allow you to see very far. And you also, La Fajada Butte allows you to get much greater views of the whole surrounding area, almost like an eye of Sauron. The Anasazi use Pueblo Pintado to celebrate the lunar standstill cycle, but differently than Pueblo Bonito, there doesn't seem to be a panoptic point at Pueblo Pintado, and Pueblo Pintado is even farther, it is out of view of Pueblo Bonito proper. So in a sense, things are not as visible, they're not as visibly expressed at Pueblo Pintado as they are at Chaco Canyon. And even more so at Whitehorse, which is out of view of La Fajada Butte and not on an azimuth of any particular importance for astronomical purposes. And in the canyons along the sides of Chakra Mesa, you could find isolation and privacy should one wish to hatch a revolt against central power in Chaco Canyon. So they're all, Pueblo Pintado, Whitehorse, and Chaco Canyon are all out of sight of each other. And it's a perfect place for a revolt should one decide one is necessary. I reviewed a 350-year history of solar eclipses at Chaco Canyon, trying to look for anything that might have served as a flashpoint for rebellion or trouble of various sorts. If one tracks the 54-year triple sorrow cycle for 350 years, one can get a pretty good track record at predicting solar eclipses at Chaco Canyon. 70% just from the 54-year triple sorrow cycle. There was a total solar eclipse at dawn on April 22nd, 1194, however, that might have been hard to predict because the previous eclipse in its cycle on March 22nd, 1140, a partial solar eclipse at dawn could have been hard to observe. It's often hard to observe partial solar eclipses because there's no sensible diminution of light. And if it happens with any kind of obscuration, you might not even notice it had occurred. And so if there was a smudge of clouds on the horizon, it could have been gone completely unobserved. And so the total solar eclipse at dawn might have caught people completely by surprise, completely flat-footed, and could have been a flashpoint for trouble if that was what people were disgruntled people were looking for, some kind of excuse to revolt or cause trouble. There's also another partial solar eclipse in September 1196 that might have been troublesome too. It was a partial solar eclipse at autumnal equinox in a year of minor lunar standstill, and the coincidence of all that might have troubled people at Chaco Canyon. So the Anasazi could have had their failures. Walt too had his failures. His strength had always been rational understanding and devotion to family. With his increasing emotionality as Heisenberg, he slowly lost these properties. And most critically, he failed to see the cool rational understanding and devotion to family represented by Todd and his Uncle Jack and his nephew Todd, who also relied on these properties to strengthen their criminal bond. So that was my first inquiry, how Breaking Bad can refreshen one's outlook on Southwestern history and geography and perhaps lead to new questions regarding the terrain. The second inquiry I had, I wondered if Red Mountain, which is a small mountain not far from Chaco Canyon, is the sacred Navajo Red Mountain. I found a reference on the internet called Sacred Places of the Navajo that identified the sacred Red Mountain as not being the one near Chaco Canyon, but as being Cerro Colorado near San Luis, New Mexico. But there's a strange fuzziness about exact location. The reference gives it as northeast to San Luis, New Mexico, when it's directly north. And I wondered if that was the correct location, because Navajo legend specifies that there should be a cave and a hot spring nearby, and to my knowledge there is neither near Cerro Colorado. But Red Mesa near San Ysidro, New Mexico might work, because you find both a hot spring and a cave nearby. In historic times, there was much fighting between the Jemez Pueblo and the Navajo, and maybe this was part of it. I don't know. And so the next stage is to find Navajo religious authorities who are willing to talk about where Red Mountain might be. So that is my presentation, and if you have any questions, you can email me at valdezmark56@gmail.com, and I'll try to provide answers. Thank you very much.